A very good morning to you. Welcome to this KTN News special forum, Has Standards by the Standard Group Women Network. My name is Najma Ismael. Now, this morning, we're going to look at the rising cases of gender-based violence during this pandemic. It's alarming, and we choose to speak.
Indeed, Najma, this is the show that amplifies the voice of the voiceless. In this inaugural episode, we focus on the silent pandemic that happens within the four walls of our homes. Whereas COVID-19 restrictions are intended to contain the invisible virus, it has led to a surge in episodes of sexual and gender-based violence. What does SGBV look like, and is there hope for victims as well as survivors? My name is Queenter Mbori, and I'm delighted to be your host. To follow these important conversations, do send your questions, comments, and experiences on Twitter, on social media. You can also participate on our Twitter poll. The question for today is, what are the main factors hindering the fight against gender-based violence? What are the factors that hinder the fight against gender-based violence? Our Twitter social media handles are KTN News Kenya. You can also tweet me directly at Queenie Saina.
At Najma, that is NAJMMER.
Yes, yeah. And remember to use the hashtag SGBV Silent Pandemic, Gender-Based Violence, hashtag has standards, so that we can easily discover you. We will definitely get back to you in a short while.
Well, we have lined up a number of guests for you this morning, and one of our panelists we have is Angelina Sikanda from the Center for Rights Education and Awareness, that is CREW. She is a Program Development Manager, Center for Rights Education and Awareness, where she spearheads programs in 8 counties. The programs advocate for women and girls to live dignified lives through skills building and capacity strengthening, public policy advocacy, public awareness campaigns, and coalition and partnership building. We're also joined by Jane Gaudiya of Women in News, who currently serves as Director for Africa, Women in News, where she's in charge of Botswana, Rwanda, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Gaudiya has worked as a journalist and editor in one of Kenya's mainstream media houses, that is Standard Group PLC. Wow. Very interesting. Yeah. Her areas of expertise include capacity building, training, coaching, mentoring, project management, event organizing and coordination, editing and publishing, report writing, journalism skills, as well as documentation. She's very passionate about women issues. Later on in the show, Jen is going to address the impact of SGBV, and we're also going to look at some of the realistic measures that we are going to look at in the show. Our other guest is Mr. Masheti Masinjila, who's a Collaborative Center for Gender and Development. A social policy researcher with bias towards gender-responsive analysis. He has experience as a member of academic faculty at universities in Kenya, as well as visiting lecturer at Dartmouth College, New Hampshire, in the United States. He has worked as a program specialist in Africa and South Asia region. He's currently the Executive Director of Collaborative Center for Gender and Development. In this capacity, he co-chairs the GBV Committee of the National Gender Sector Working Group and hosts the East African Civil Society Organization Forum of Kenya. He is the chair of the East African Community Kenya National Dialogue Committee, NDC, and member of the EAC Regional Dialogue Committee. All right. Dr. Susan Gitau is a counseling psychologist. She's a lecturer at African Nazarene University. She's also a certified mediator. She's an expert of training of trainers and an accredited counselor supervisor with Kenya Counselors and Psychological Association, KCPA. She's also a member of East African Standby Force, EASF of AU. Wow.
Well, President Uhuru Kenyatta has directed the National Crime Research Center to move with speed and commence investigations on increasing cases of gender-based violence and teenage pregnancies in the country. This is at a time when different reports indicate a surge in the number of teen pregnancies, with schools remaining closed over coronavirus. Elvis Koskei has the details.
Following the increased cases of domestic and sexual violence cases in the wake of the novel virus pandemic, the head of state announced a raft of COVID-19 measures and ordered an immediate probe into their vices, saying perpetrators must face the full force of the law.
I also further direct and order the National Crime Research Center to probe 3 issues. First is the escalating cases of gender-based violence. The second is the worrying trend of cases where the girl child has been disempowered. And the third is the violation of children's rights.
The president also pointed out the worrying numbers of teenage pregnancies and violations of children's rights that have been on the rise. He appealed to the social institutions, such as religious institutions, to be more vigilant and help protect children.
We must always remember that the family is a projection of the state. If the family is under attack, the state is under attack. If the family is weak, a nation is weak.
The increasing tension within homes across the country catching the attention of the president.
The center is further directed to prepare an advisory to the security agents on remedial action within 30 days from the date of today and initiate immediate prosecution of all violators.
Kipkorir Ngetich, the head of Center for Human Rights and Democracy in the North region, says President Kenyatta's move is long overdue. He says as a human rights body, they have been reporting cases of worrying numbers of teenage pregnancies to the relevant authority, with no action being taken.
Most of these people who are the culprits in this kind of fights are known. They are known by the chiefs, they are known by the Nyumba Kumi, and it is now high time for them to act and ensure that they deliver the right information to the relevant arms of government who are now going to deal with that matter.
Ngetich lauded the president's move, but wants the head of state to initiate tougher measures.
A human rights body will also assist and help those instruments of government with important information that will lead to the arrest of these culprits. So it has been long overdue. We salute the president, and we want to also ask him to ensure that the directives he has given today comes with results.
Gender-based violence cases have been on the rise in the wake of coronavirus pandemic, especially in Nairobi, Kisumu, Central Region, and Rift Valley, with schools remaining closed. Elvis Koskei, KTN News, Uasin Gishu County.
Welcome back. Today we are joined by Angela Shikanda of Center for Rights Education and Awareness. And she's a program development manager at CRU. And today she's coming to break down some of the SGB cases into numbers, where she's going to highlight the county by county cases, and so that we get to understand the extent of sexual and gender-based violence across the regions. So welcome, Angela. How are you feeling?
I'm okay, thank you very much.
All right. So looking at the statistics that have been provided, maybe we can just start, we can ask briefly, what are some of the regions that are worst hit by sexual and gender-based violence?
The regions that have been hit by sexual and gender-based violence cases, we have increasing cases in Nairobi, we have increased cases in areas like Bomet, Narok, Kilifi, Mombasa. We're also seeing cases in Isiolo, Meru, and the increase in numbers has reached up to 64%, higher than the usual numbers that we were seeing previously before COVID. In terms of the, so as you can see with the numbers, Isiolo is very high. We have cases in Meru, We're also having cases in Kitui and Nyeri, Nairobi and Narok are some of the areas that with very high cases. In Narok, we're seeing a lot of cases around FGM as families are struggling with economic times, and so the option they are picking is to, take the girls through FGM so that they can be married off to the highest bidder. We're also seeing high cases of sexual violence. Domestic violence remains the highest type of violence that has been observed, especially physical violence, followed by sexual violence, cases of rape and defilement, hence the increasing cases of teenage pregnancies that have been observed countrywide, and also cases of economic violence.
Well, Angela, I think one of the questions that many people are wondering is we have classified the forms of violence into sexual, domestic, economical, as well as psychological. Maybe if you could just briefly highlight what each represents and the impact that it has on the victims.
Okay, with sexual violence, we are talking about incidences of rape, cases of defilement. We have cases of sodomy that are very high in the communities. When we talk about domestic violence, we're talking about physical violence, we're talking about violence between husband and wives, and not just women who are suffering, we're also seeing cases of men who are being adversely affected by domestic violence. Economic violence, we are seeing incidences whereby families are struggling to manage the hard economic times, so there's no longer any income at the household level. So in terms of taking care of the basic needs of the family, in an attempt to try and resolve this, then conflicts arise within the family setting, the result of which you'll find now a woman is being denied money, for example, she cannot access pads, you cannot access safe water, you cannot access, there's no place to stay, so you're thrown out of the house. You're seeing someone without any income whatsoever to even have food on the table and take care of the children. So those are some of the things that we've been observing, especially at this time with COVID. The only difference is that because of COVID, the numbers have quickly sharpened and they're really high at this point in time. And so you'll find that all the institutions working on this issue, we are now grappling with how to support these many cases that are coming out. And also psychological violence has to do with how families are engaging together. Instead of having healthy conversations at home, it's about insults, it's about name calling, it's about shaming the other party, it's about making the other person feel demeaned because of their gender. It's about, now people calling each other names, giving each other the silent treatment, not communicating sufficiently, and therefore someone feeling that they don't belong, and yet this is their home, this is their household, this is their family, and it's family members who are meeting all this kind of violence.
Well, Angelina, I've seen some of the counties have higher numbers, others have low numbers. What are some of the factors that make this county? Some counties have high, some counties have low. Is it that some counties are more economically, empowered, or what's happening there?
Not necessarily about economic, but it's about the livelihoods of the communities. So we're seeing most of the urban counties as being the ones which are more adversely affected. Remember, towns like Nairobi had a lockdown, and so those who were working outside of Nairobi County found themselves in a very difficult situation, and so it was very difficult to navigate. Counties like Narok, where a large percentage of the population are pastoralists, and they rely on that kind of market. The markets were closed. So where does the family get their income from? So without any other alternative sources, and people not having planned for this kind of scenario where we find ourselves with COVID, then they don't have much of options on what to do. So they're looking at what else can they do. And so for communities like the pastoralist communities, whereby girls are looked at as also as a form of income, where they're looking at bride price or somewhere they can get some economic muscle as being an option. And so cases of FGM being very high in places like that, and Isiolo for that matter.
Well, just joining us also is our panelist, who is Jane Gaudiya. She is the Director for Africa Women in News. Welcome to the show, Jane.
Jane is joining us from our City Center studios. Welcome, Jane.
Well, Jane Gaudiya, thank you for joining us. We are having this conversation on sexual violence, and we've just had Angela break down the statistics on sexual and gender-based violence. Looking at the statistics that are coming from Nairobi, we've seen very high cases of economic violence. What is your take on that?
I think the reason why we are seeing high cases of economic violence is because there's no money coming into pockets and wallets. A great majority of Kenyans have lost their jobs. A great majority of Nairobi residents are people who do casual labor, and we find that many places of work have been closed, and hence people are not earning. The level of earning has gone down. And when people don't have money in their pockets, there's a lot of frustration. And in this frustration, the people who will suffer are the nearest people to this person. So if a husband doesn't have money, his anger, his inability to support his family turns into anger, and this anger is then perpetrated on the people who are nearest to him, and these are members of his family. So that is why you find that there's a lot of economic violence, because if a mother has children, the mother will most probably ask the husband for money to go and buy food, or for money to go and buy paraffin for cooking, or for money to go and buy gas, or for money to go and buy water. We know that there's a lot of buying of water in Nairobi, and if this man is not even able to give the wife 20 bob, he will feel very frustrated. And if the children ask him for food and say, "Daddy, I'm hungry," and there is no food in the house, the guy he feels like, well, I'm not able to take care of my family. And that then becomes a frustration that turns into anger. And when frustration turns into anger, the people who are nearest then become the culprits of that anger. They become the victims of that anger from that man.
Well, Jane, you're a journalist and you've spent years in the newsroom, and we have been reporting about these cases of gender-based violence. It's only now that maybe there's an increase due to the pandemic. But what are some of the problems that, the government is not doing? We have been talking about this every single year. Every day we talk about gender-based violence, but the cases are still increasing. Is there a solution? Is it the government not, giving policies that, can be followed?
I think Kenya as a country has done quite well in terms of developing laws and policies that address sexual and gender-based violence. Other than the Sexual Offences Act, we also have the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act. And those are very good laws. If you go through them, particularly if you look at the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act of 2015, it's a very good law. And we can't even blame the government. What we need to say is, how can we come together as a nation to bring down these cases? And one of the best things that is happening currently, and I think it has been done with the Ministry of Gender and other stakeholders, is the development of regulations on how to use the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act. And this is because the law was there, but when you go to courts or when you meet the police, they didn't know how to put it into practice. So the development of the regulations is going to help in terms of how do we address violence that takes place at the domestic level. And I think that is something that is very good. Something else that we need to do is to encourage reporting of cases and to encourage prosecution of those cases. Many times you'll find that a victim of domestic violence will go to the police station and report in the morning. By afternoon, this person is going to the police station to withdraw the case. Why is this so? This is because most probably the woman is a housewife. She was beaten by her husband, and she has gone to report her husband to the police. So when she reports him, where will she go? Yet he's the one who pays rent. He's the one who buys food. He's the one who feeds her and her children. So then she realizes that actually I can't have this man jailed. Because if he's jailed, what will happen to me and my children? So there is need to create community awareness. I think this has been going on for some time, but maybe it has not reached everybody, that we really need to start talking about these issues to break the silence. Because when there's a lot of quiet around something that is happening, then it becomes a problem. And the silence has been our biggest challenge. Not really the government, but the fact that where violence is happening and people are not talking about it, where violence is happening and people are not reporting, where violence is happening and kangaroo courts are being put in place to sort of erase the fact that it happened, and you find that the wazes or the community elders just sit and slaughter a goat and eat meat and then decide that things are okay. And you know, that does not help, because if somebody starts beating you today and nothing is done about it, in the next 10 years, this guy will have beaten you like 1,000 times. So it's really about addressing the issue right from the root. And for me, the root of addressing that issue is socialization. How do we get socialized?
Thank you, Jane, for your sentiments. Remember, she said the silence has been our biggest challenge.
And we choose to speak.
Exactly. We've chosen to speak.
Yeah.
So we are going to take a short break, but before we do so, we would like to remind you that you can actively participate in this conversation. Our Twitter poll for today, we've asked you a question: what are the main factors hindering the fight against GBV? What are the main factors hindering the fight against GBV? You can send your feedback, comments, questions, and experiences on our social media handles at KTN News Kenya, at Queenie Saina,
At Najma,
and at Standard Group Women Network. Remember to use the hashtag SGBV Silent Pandemic, hashtag gender-based violence, and hashtag #standards. We'll definitely get back to you in a short while.